Look at the ground. Pick up a rock. A red, dirty, completely ordinary rock. Now, imagine turning that rock into a sword. To a modern person, this makes sense. We know about iron ore, but to an ancient human living 3,500 years ago, that idea was completely insane because metal wasn't supposed to look like dirt. Welcome to the late Bronze Age, the peak of early civilization. Ancient Egypt, the Hittites, the Mycenaeans. They built massive cities, giant pyramids, and huge armies, and they did it all using bronze. Bronze is an amazing metal. It is hard, durable, and melts easily. You can pour it into a mold and make exactly what you want. But bronze has one massive, civilization-ending flaw. It is not a natural element. It is an alloy. To make bronze, you need 90% copper and 10% tin. Copper is relatively common. Tin is incredibly rare. In the ancient Mediterranean, finding tin was harder than finding gold. To keep their armies equipped, empires had to trade across thousands of miles. They relied on a fragile, complex global supply chain. Tin from distant islands like Britain had to travel all the way to Egypt. It was a beautiful, interconnected system. Until it wasn't. Around 1200 BC, the system completely collapsed. Earthquakes, devastating droughts, and mysterious sea raiders destroyed the trade routes. Cities burned. Empires fell. And suddenly, the tin stopped flowing. Without tin, there is no bronze. Without bronze, there are no plows for farming and no swords for defense. Humanity was thrown back into the Dark Ages. They were desperate for a new metal, and the crazy thing is, the solution was literally right beneath their feet. Iron is the fourth most abundant element in the Earth's crust. You don't have to trade across an ocean to find it. It's everywhere. So why didn't they use it? Because the Earth doesn't just give you iron. It hides it. Iron loves oxygen. It bonds with it instantly. This creates iron oxide, also known as rust. In nature, iron doesn't look like shiny metal. It looks like dull, red dirt. If you throw copper rocks into a regular campfire, they will melt. Copper melts at roughly 1000 degrees Celsius. A decent wood fire can reach that. But iron? Iron is stubborn. To melt iron, you need to reach 1538 degrees Celsius. A regular campfire will never, ever get that hot. You can stare at a red rock in a fire for 10 years, and it will just get warm. So, ancient humans looked at iron ore and thought it was completely useless. But here is the massive plot twist of history. Ancient humans actually did know about iron, long before the Iron Age even began. But they didn't dig it out of the ground. They looked up. The very first iron humanity ever used came from outer space. Meteorites. When a meteorite crashes into Earth, it often contains pure, metallic iron. No oxygen. No red dirt. Just solid space metal. When King Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, archaeologists found a beautiful iron dagger resting on his mummy. It was made hundreds of years before humanity learned to smelt iron. Chemical analysis proved it contained high levels of nickel and cobalt, the undeniable chemical signature of a meteorite. To the ancients, iron was pure magic. It was the metal of heaven. It was far rarer and much more valuable than gold. But you can't build a massive civilization on random shooting stars. Somebody had to figure out how to extract it from the dirt. And like most great human inventions, they probably figured it out completely by accident. Imagine an ancient potter working in the mud. They are building a massive clay oven to bake their pots. A kiln. A kiln traps heat, making the fire much hotter than an open campfire. To build this oven, they grab the nearest heavy rocks. By pure luck, they use red rocks. Iron ore. They throw in charcoal, which is almost pure carbon, and they start pumping air into the fire to get it roaring. Inside that oven, a chemical miracle happens. The fire doesn't reach 1500 degrees. It doesn't melt the iron, but it gets just hot enough for the carbon in the charcoal to steal the oxygen atoms away from the red rocks. The carbon and oxygen bond and float away as invisible gas. The fire dies down. The potter pulls the rocks out, but they aren't red rocks anymore. They have turned into a disgusting, spongy lump of gray material. It's full of slag, ash, and structural impurities. Blacksmiths call this a bloom. To the ancient potter, it looks like garbage. A ruined rock. But maybe, just maybe, they hit it with a stone hammer in frustration, and it didn't shatter into a million pieces. It bent, because beneath the ash, it was solid metal. The potter realized that if you heat this red dirt, and then literally beat the impurities out of it with a hammer, you get the magic metal of the gods. You get iron. They didn't need to melt it. They just needed to smash it. This was the birth of the bloomery forge, and it changed the trajectory of the human race forever. But discovering how to make iron was only half the battle. Making it actually useful was a whole different nightmare. Here is the harsh reality that ancient blacksmiths quickly discovered. Pure iron is actually terrible for making weapons. While bronze is incredibly hard and holds a razor-sharp edge, early bloomery iron was surprisingly soft, bending easily if you hit something too hard with it. If an ancient soldier went into battle with a pure iron sword against an enemy with a bronze sword, the iron sword would literally bend in half during the very first clash. The soldier would have to step on their own sword to bend it back into shape, which is not a great strategy when someone is actively trying to kill you. Because of this, early iron wasn't immediately seen as a superior replacement for bronze. It was merely a desperate substitute. It was the metal you used when the tin supply chain completely collapsed and you had absolutely no other options available to make farm tools or defend your village. But then, another accidental chemical miracle occurred in the ancient forges. Blacksmiths realized that if they repeatedly heated the iron in a charcoal fire and hammered it over and over again, something magical started to happen to the metal itself. The surface of the iron was actually absorbing carbon atoms directly from the burning charcoal. Without even realizing what chemistry they were doing, these ancient people were creating a crude, early version of steel, making the outer layer of the weapon significantly harder. This process is known as carburization, and it required an immense amount of physical labor, sweat, and time from the blacksmith. You couldn't just pour this metal into a neat mold like you could with bronze. Every single iron tool had to be violently shaped by hand with a heavy hammer. But once they figured out this carbon trick, the rules of human civilization completely shifted in favor of this new metal. An iron sword that had been properly carbonized and quenched in water was significantly harder, sharper, and more lethal than the best bronze sword ever made. However, the true superpower of iron wasn't just its strength in battle, but its absolute abundance in the Earth's crust. As we established earlier, you didn't need to control a complex, fragile international trade route to get your hands on iron ore. Any village, any tribe, and any local warlord could find red dirt near their settlement and start producing their own weapons. The monopoly that the giant, wealthy Bronze Age empires held over military power was suddenly broken by the sheer accessibility of iron. We call this the democratization of warfare, and it completely terrified the established rulers of the ancient world. You no longer needed vast wealth to arm your soldiers. You just needed dirt, wood for charcoal, and a few exceptionally strong blacksmiths. Because iron was so cheap and abundant, empires could now afford to equip massive, sprawling armies with heavy armor and weapons. The Assyrian Empire was one of the first to fully exploit this, building a brutal, unstoppable military machine entirely powered by iron weaponry. But iron didn't just change how humans killed each other. It fundamentally changed how we interacted with the planet itself. Before iron, cutting down a massive ancient forest with soft bronze axes was a nearly impossible, painstakingly slow task that took generations. With heavy, durable iron axes, humans could suddenly clear vast areas of dense woodland in a fraction of the time. This massive deforestation allowed them to create endless fields for farming, which led to an unprecedented explosion in the global human population. Furthermore, heavy iron plowshares could dig much deeper into hard soils that would have instantly shattered a fragile wooden or bronze plow. This meant ancient humans could now farm in harsh environments and difficult climates that were previously considered completely uninhabitable. In a very real sense, iron is the specific tool that allowed humanity to finally conquer and tame the natural environment on a global scale. But extracting all of this iron came with a devastating environmental cost that ancient people were completely unprepared for. To smelt iron in a bloomery forge, you don't use regular wood. You must use charcoal to reach the required extreme temperatures. And producing enough charcoal to supply an ancient army required burning down an absolutely staggering amount of trees. For example, historians estimate that the Roman Empire's insatiable demand for iron completely deforested massive regions of Europe and the Mediterranean. The landscape of the ancient world was permanently scarred and altered just to feed the endless hunger of the iron furnaces. It is deeply poetic when you realize exactly what iron is on a fundamental, cosmic level. Iron is the final, heavy element that is fused in the core of a massive, dying star right before it goes supernova. The violent death of a distant star scattered that iron across the universe, eventually seeding the cloud of dust that became our Earth. That same extraterrestrial element is quite literally coursing through your veins right at this exact moment. The hemoglobin in human blood uses iron atoms to bind with oxygen and carry it from your lungs to the rest of your body. The reason your blood is red is precisely the same reason that the rocks those ancient blacksmiths melted were red: oxidized iron. So, when an ancient warrior gripped a heavy iron sword, they were holding the core of a dead star in a hand fueled by the exact same element. It represents a strange, unbreakable biological and technological symmetry that defines the entire human experience. Even today, in the 21st century, we are still living entirely in the Iron Age, despite what the tech industry tells you. Silicon and plastic might run our computers, but iron and its modern form, steel, form the invisible, load-bearing skeleton of the modern world. Every massive skyscraper, every suspension bridge, every cargo ship, and every railroad track on Earth relies completely on this ancient metal. We produce nearly 2 billion tons of steel every single year just to keep human civilization from collapsing under its own weight. Yet, despite our absolute mastery over it, iron is constantly fighting a slow, invisible war to return to its original, natural state. Because iron is so highly reactive with oxygen, it desperately wants to rust and turn back into that red dirt the ancients first found. We spend billions of dollars annually painting, coating, and galvanizing our iron structures just to delay this inevitable chemical reaction. It is a constant, unending battle against entropy, fighting to keep our cities from slowly dissolving back into the earth. When you look closely at this history, the discovery of iron wasn't just a technological upgrade. It was a profound shift in human psychology. It taught our ancestors that the greatest, most powerful resources aren't always shiny and obvious, like gold or copper. Sometimes, the tools needed to completely revolutionize the world look like nothing more than useless, dirty rocks scattered in the mud. It took a rare combination of pure desperation, accidental chemistry, and sheer stubbornness to unlock the secret hiding inside the dirt. They had to learn how to harness the intense, destructive power of fire in ways that no other animal on Earth had ever dared to try. By violently beating the impurities out of the earth, they forged the foundation of every empire that followed. The story of iron is essentially the ultimate story of human ingenuity, taking the mundane and transforming it into the extraordinary. From the moment that first confused potter smashed an ugly gray rock and realized it was metal, there was no going back. The Bronze Age was dead, buried under the ash of the new forges, and the modern world was officially born in the flames. To truly grasp the scale of the Iron Age, we must look at how it redefined the concept of human labor and survival. Before iron tools were widespread, simple tasks like harvesting crops or building a wooden shelter were exhausting, backbreaking endeavors. A bronze sickle might get the job done, but it would quickly lose its edge, requiring constant sharpening and careful maintenance by the farmer. An iron sickle, once properly forged, could slice through thick stalks of wheat for days on end without failing. This drastic increase in agricultural efficiency meant fewer people needed to work the fields to produce the same amount of food. And when a society produces a massive surplus of food, it unlocks the ability for its citizens to specialize in other professions. People could become dedicated scholars, full-time artists, complex engineers, and professional politicians instead of just subsistence farmers. Iron didn't just build stronger swords. It literally built the intricate social classes and economies that define complex modern civilizations. It is no coincidence that the explosion of profound philosophical thought, from ancient Greece to China, happened during the Iron Age. When you are no longer starving, and you have durable tools doing the heavy lifting, the human mind is finally free to wander. However, this incredible technological leap forward also introduced humanity to the concept of industrial-scale environmental destruction. We mentioned deforestation earlier, but the true scale of the ancient charcoal industry is almost impossible to comprehend today. Entire mountainsides were stripped completely bare of trees, leading to massive soil erosion that permanently altered the geography of Europe and Asia. Rivers that once flowed deep and clear became choked with mud and silt, forever changing the local ecosystems. The ancient iron forges also pumped unprecedented amounts of smoke, ash, and toxic heavy metals directly into the atmosphere. Ice core samples taken from Greenland actually show spikes in global atmospheric pollution that perfectly align with the height of the Roman Empire's iron production. Thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution, ancient humans were already leaving a permanent, toxic chemical signature on the planet's climate. The pursuit of this magical red dirt proved that human progress always comes with an invisible, often devastating, long-term price tag. But the ancient blacksmiths working the bellows couldn't see the global climate. They only saw the glowing, red-hot metal right in front of them. To them, the forge was a place of almost divine magic, a sacred space where the raw elements of earth and fire were commanded by man. In many ancient cultures, the blacksmith was viewed with a mixture of deep reverence and intense, superstitious fear. They were often treated as outcasts or shamans, living on the edges of the village, because they possessed the dangerous knowledge of the gods. In folklore and mythology around the world, you frequently find stories of magical blacksmiths who forge weapons for heroes and deities. The Greek god Hephaestus, the Norse dwarves, the Celtic smith deities, they all reflect humanity's awe at the power of metallurgy. This mythological connection makes perfect sense when you remember that the very first iron these cultures encountered literally fell from the sky as meteorites. Even after they learned to extract it from the mud, the metal retained its mystical reputation as something deeply otherworldly and powerful. It's fascinating how iron is universally used in folklore as a protective charm to ward off evil spirits, witches, and malevolent fairies. The idea that a simple iron horseshoe nailed above a door can block dark magic speaks to the deep psychological impact the metal had on our ancestors. They subconsciously understood that iron was the element that separated civilized, protected humanity from the wild, untamed chaos of nature. It was the absolute anchor of reality, a solid, heavy truth that shattered the fragile myths of the past. As the centuries passed, the crude bloomery furnaces slowly evolved into massive, towering blast furnaces capable of reaching even higher temperatures. Instead of just creating a spongy bloom, these advanced furnaces could actually melt the iron completely into a liquid state. This liquid could be poured directly into molds, creating cast iron, which allowed for the mass production of tools, pipes, and eventually, massive cannons. The transition to cast iron was the critical stepping stone that finally pushed humanity out of the ancient world and into the industrial age. And yet, despite all our modern advancements, the fundamental chemistry of making steel remains surprisingly similar to what that ancient potter discovered. We are still just taking iron oxide, mixing it with carbon, and blasting it with incredible heat to steal away the oxygen atoms. We just do it in giant, computer-controlled factories instead of small clay ovens built in the mud by a desperate tribe. The scale has changed dramatically, but the raw, brutal relationship between humans and this stubborn element is exactly the same. Consider for a moment the sheer volume of iron that surrounds you in your daily life, hidden just out of sight. The nails holding your house together, the rebar reinforcing the concrete under your feet, the intricate machinery inside your car. If you somehow magically removed all the iron from the world right now, human civilization would instantly disintegrate into dust. Buildings would collapse, electrical grids would shatter, and our entire transportation network would vanish in the blink of an eye. We are a species that has tied our ultimate fate to a rock that wants nothing more than to turn back into rust. It is a beautiful, fragile arrangement, heavily dependent on our constant vigilance and endless application of protective paints and oils. This constant decay is a quiet reminder that nature ultimately reclaims everything we build, no matter how strong we think it is. The mightiest Roman iron swords have long since rusted away into nothingness, leaving only red stains in the archaeological record. But the knowledge of how to forge that sword, the invisible, intellectual legacy of the Iron Age, has survived thousands of years. We didn't just inherit the tools of our ancestors. We inherited their relentless drive to manipulate the physical world to our advantage. The discovery of iron proves that humanity's greatest strength isn't our physical power, but our profound ability to observe and experiment. We look at a useless, dirty red rock and refuse to accept that it is just a rock. We imagine the sword hiding inside. We are the only creatures on this planet that can look at the dirt and envision a skyscraper reaching into the clouds. And we achieve that vision not through magic, but through thousands of years of trial, error, sweat, and blistering heat. So the next time you hold a simple steel knife or walk past a massive steel bridge, take a moment to really look at it. You are not just looking at a mundane, everyday object. You are looking at the culmination of human history. You are looking at the end of the Bronze Age, the collapse of ancient empires, and the birth of the modern industrial world. You are looking at the blood of dying stars, pulled from the mud and beaten into shape by the sheer willpower of our ancestors. The story of iron is a testament to the fact that our civilization was built by people who simply refused to give up. When the trade routes failed and the bronze disappeared, they didn't just lie down and let the darkness consume them. They dug their hands into the dirt, built a fire hotter than any natural flame, and forged a brand new future from the ashes. And that relentless drive to forge a new future hasn't stopped. It has only accelerated as we look toward the stars. The very element that ancient humans first found in meteorites is now the key to our eventual expansion into the cosmos. When we finally build permanent colonies on Mars, the first resources we will mine won't be precious gold or advanced exotic materials. We will be mining the massive deposits of iron oxide that literally give the red planet its famous, rusty color. The first Martian structures, the habitats that will keep future astronauts alive in that hostile environment, will be forged from local iron. Humanity will essentially repeat the exact same technological awakening on another planet that we experienced here on Earth thousands of years ago. We will once again be taking red dirt, heating it up, and beating it into the foundation of a brand new civilization. It is a perfect, poetic circle, from space meteorites to Earth dirt, and eventually back out into the endless expanse of space. This universal reliance on iron isn't just a quirk of our specific history. It is a fundamental law of physics and chemistry. Iron holds the most stable atomic nucleus of all the elements, making it the ultimate endpoint of nuclear fusion in stars. Because of this cosmic stability, iron is destined to be one of the most abundant heavy materials across the entire universe. Any alien civilization, anywhere in the galaxy, would likely have to pass through their own version of the Iron Age to advance. They, too, would have to discover how to separate the metal from the oxygen, struggling with the intense heat required to melt it. They, too, would experience the brutal democratization of warfare and the massive environmental cost of feeding their early, hungry forges. In a way, the process of smelting iron is a universal cosmic test of intelligence, a necessary threshold for any developing species. It separates simple, primitive tool users from advanced, planet-altering civilizations capable of reshaping their environment on a massive scale. When you think about it from this incredibly broad, galactic perspective, the ancient potter who accidentally made that first spongy bloom wasn't just inventing a new tool. That unknown, prehistoric human was officially passing the cosmic test on behalf of the entire human race. They were proving that we had the intelligence, the curiosity, and the sheer audacity to bend the basic elements of the universe to our will. We often focus on the famous kings, the massive battles, and the grand political treaties when we study ancient history in school. But the true architects of our world weren't the pharaohs or the emperors sitting on their comfortable, golden thrones. The true architects were the nameless, soot-covered blacksmiths coughing on charcoal smoke in the dark, dirty corners of the ancient world. They were the ones who actually built the physical reality we inhabit, hammer strike by hammer strike, over thousands of grueling years. Without their obsessive dedication to mastering this stubborn red rock, every single historical event that followed would have been impossible. There would be no Roman Empire, no Industrial Revolution, no skyscrapers, and certainly no spaceships exploring the void. We owe our entire existence as a modern, advanced species to a metal that we originally didn't even know how to use. a metal that we completely ignored for centuries because we were too distracted by the shiny, easy appeal of copper and bronze. It is a profound lesson in humility, reminding us that the answers to our greatest problems might already be right in front of us. They might just look like ordinary dirt, waiting patiently for us to develop the correct perspective and the right amount of heat. Today, as we face new global challenges and desperate shortages of critical modern resources like rare earth metals and lithium, we would do well to remember the story of the Bronze Age collapse. When our complex, international supply chains are threatened, the solution won't always be found by digging deeper into the old systems. The solution might require us to look at the abundant, ignored materials around us and figure out a completely new way to forge them. We must channel the spirit of those desperate, brilliant ancient humans who looked at a ruined, collapsed world and decided to rebuild it from scratch. We must be willing to smash our preconceived notions, throw our current limitations into the fire, and see what survives the flames. Because if history has taught us absolutely anything, it is that human ingenuity is the only resource that truly never runs out. As long as we have curiosity, fire, and a willingness to hit things with a hammer, we will always find a way forward. The Iron Age never really ended. It simply evolved, wrapping itself in wires, concrete, and lines of digital code. We are still those same tribal apes, sitting around a ridiculously hot fire, trying to figure out how to make better tools. The only difference is that our fire is now a nuclear reactor, and our tools are orbiting the planet at 17,000 miles per hour. But underneath all the advanced technology, the fundamental human drive remains exactly the same as it was 3,000 years ago. We want to survive, we want to build, and we want to leave a lasting mark on a universe that is constantly trying to erase us. And nothing leaves a more permanent, undeniable mark on the world than a solid piece of well-forged iron. It is the physical manifestation of human stubbornness, a heavy, cold middle finger to the forces of entropy and decay. It is the metal that broke the ancient world, only to forge a much larger, much stronger one in its place. So, to answer the question, how did ancient humans discover iron? They didn't just discover it. They were forced to find it by a world that was falling apart around them. They found it in the terrifying fiery streaks of falling meteorites that crashed into the prehistoric Earth. They found it in the accidental, magical chemistry of a clay pottery kiln burning just a little too hot. And most importantly, they found it through sheer, unyielding perseverance in the face of total societal collapse. They took the most abundant, ignored, and stubborn rock on the planet and forced it to yield to their will. They beat the red dirt until it became a sword, a plow, an empire, and eventually, the entire modern world. You are sitting in a building held up by it, using technology manufactured by it, with the element itself flowing through your veins. We didn't just discover iron. We bonded with it, tying the fate of our species to its incredible strength and its inevitable rust. It is the metal of heaven, the dirt of the earth, and the undisputed king of all human materials. Next time you see a piece of rusty metal on the ground, don't just ignore it as trash. Show a little respect. You're looking at the rock that conquered the world.